Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about accessory work and the fact that as lifters, the more advanced that we get, the more that we benefit from doing accessory work. And there's a number of reasons for that. Early on, with fairly novice lifters and even to some extent intermediates, what we find is that doing a handful of really basic big lifts and then filling in the gaps a little bit as needed with smaller exercises tends to produce the best overall results in size and strength. And it has to do with the fact that number one, weaker lifters just can't move enough tonnage to really have problems from overtraining. I mean, they can, and they'll just gain less muscle if they just do way too much. But on their basic lifts, as long as they're programmed well, they tend to recover, especially if they're eating and sleeping. We don't have to worry about things like axial loading. We don't have to worry about all of that. And they have a very, very low proficiency at their movements. In other words, they haven't mastered basic movement patterns. And so for them, doing around 5, 6, 7 exercises at the most will produce maximum results. And it has to do with the fact that these big movements use a lot of muscle. They will build a lot of muscle. These are also people who are capable of making their noob gains. And because we're dealing with the whole concept of progressive overload early on, by mastering the movements of these big exercises, they can get a lot done. They can get a lot of progressive overload, like on a squat, bench, deadlift, overhead pressing, rows, whatever. Right? As they get proficient with them, they'll be able to get good at recruiting muscle fibers at them. And that's something that we have to think about with big multi-joint movements. It's not as big of a deal as smaller exercises, but it's really hard to get big off of doing small exercises. You have to spend hours and hours in the gym. Okay, it's not an efficient use of their time, but as they master and develop the intramuscular coordination and everything to do these bigger movements, the progressive overload goes up quick, and a handful of big exercises will pretty much work all the muscles in their body. Even secondary muscles oftentimes for the novice will grow a lot. In other words, their biceps will probably grow from the rows. Their triceps will grow from the benching and overhead pressing, and so on and so forth. These are not going to be a problem for them. All right? Just rows and deadlifts alone will build their back pretty big. They'll get sufficient hamstring development just from the deadlifts, right? So a lot of these muscles that may not, for an advanced lifter, actually develop quick for them off of these movements because they're untrained and they're mastering the movements. Progressive overload goes up. They just get bigger and stronger. As we start to get more advanced, here's what we find. Hypertrophy starts going down quickly in some of these secondary muscles. You might actually need some supine grip work or curls to make your biceps grow. Depending upon the lifter, you might need a lot more tricep work. Things like the long head of the tricep and so forth may not be developing. The lateral head will keep developing from the benching and pressing. The others may start to lag. Your rear delts may not be getting enough work, just from purely rows. Again, unless we're doing a lot of volume of rows and pull-ups. Hey, the hamstrings might need some extra work. So on and so forth. These things start to become to where some of these muscles that get places slightly secondary importance won't grow as fast as some of the others. You'll get a point where one muscle will start growing faster than the others on a big multi-joint movement. And it's going to depend upon genetics, leverage, as everything else, weak points. So it becomes more useful to start working in a higher variety of exercises. Number two, we've already mastered these movements. If you're extremely proficient at the squat, bench, and deadlift, practicing them all the time, to that degree to where you're doing 6 or 7, 8 sets a week of each one of them, may not be that useful anymore from a skill learning perspective. Right? These are not super complex exercises. Once you've gotten good at them, you're good at them, and you need less work to continue to improve at them. And what you may find is that our tonnage starts getting so high on these movements that recovery becomes more difficult. And it's not that we can't do enough to grow, It's that we really can't facilitate maximal muscle growth potentially as we start to get bigger and more advanced off of just these movements. We may be able to if you can recover, right? If you can recover, sure. But for people who get very advanced, who you see still doing this, who get big, a lot of times they're bulking all the time, right? They're bulking all the time. They're on a lot of gear. Therefore, their recovery is going to be better. So we get to a point where, in order to maximize hypertrophy, we start needing more exercises that are easier to recover from to fill in our volume gaps, right? To fill in our volume gaps, because at the end of the day, what do we know? A bigger muscle has more strength potential. This is what study after study after study says. You know, you get people who argue, well, you know, no size doesn't equal strength. Strength is a skill. Strength is a skill, but it's heavily dependent upon your muscle mass. For you as an individual, obviously your individual levers and moment arms and everything matter, but lean body mass matters, right? And sometimes when you see the guys who are really strong pound for pound, they've got great leverages. They might be shorter. Maybe the reason they look smaller could be because the exercises they're not as good at. You know, maybe they don't look big, but they have the big squat and deadlift because they can't bench. And they're at a low body fat. They're real lean, so in clothes they may not look that big. Right? Being at 18% body fat, you're going to look a hell of a lot bigger in clothes than you will at 10%. Now, clothes come off, you look bigger, leaner, but not when you're covered up. So, you know, again, people will see that and then not realize, though, that it's still lean body mass. Still lean body mass involved relative to levers. So we have to maximize hypertrophy if we want to keep getting stronger. And if you want to do pound for pound, then you're just going to have to get leaner if you care about weight classes and stuff. Right? You have to just get leaner, but you've got to keep getting bigger. And again, in order to do that successfully, oftentimes we need to add, you know, more supplemental work in order to get there. We have to have more hypertrophy training. And again, these smaller exercises, you know, such as, again, you saw me doing incline bench and tricep extensions, lying tricep extensions. Okay. Might be a little easier to recover from than the flat bench. Again, due to lighter weight move and a different focus on different heads of the muscles. Good mornings are a lot easier to recover from than deadlifts. The reverse hypers are a lot easier to recover from than deadlifts. Okay, and so on and so forth. Belt squats, leg press are easier to recover from than squatting. They'll let you fill in the gap afterwards. Single leg exercises, the same idea here. All right, the list goes on and on and on. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.